That's right, I am in our auditorium of our campus in Saltillo, obviously without any people. And effectively, this is the third Sunday of June, Father's Day. So if you have the joy of having your father near, congratulate him, pamper him. It's his day. I am a father myself of two children, one teenage girl, she's 12, and my princess, and a 9-year-old kid who, by the way, loves sports. My son enjoys watching me work. He loves watching me here on stage. Right, kid? Do you love watching me here? Well, sometimes kids are not as expressive as they should. But anyway, today for all fathers, we have a prize. We want to give out something to you fathers, and the dynamic is very, very simple. If you are a father and are watching us, you're watching this transmission live, write to us on the chat because we're going to give out one prize to the father who has the most children. So if you have a lot of children, 4, 5, 7, 10 children, write to us there on the chat and we will get a prize to you. How many children do you have? The father with the most children will be the winner. So do it now, and at the end of the meeting, we will contact you to send that prize to you. Also, for all of us who are fathers today as a church, we want to put in your hands something to all fathers. And some of the pastors here in the church, I had the opportunity of recording a series of videos giving short advices regarding fatherhood. So right now there's a link with a QR code so that you can download and watch those videos. You also have a link so that you can go through that link and enjoy these videos and together learn more about how to be better fathers. It's a gift we want to give to you fathers who are watching us today right now. Besides, I want to talk to the people who are here for the first time with us. And maybe you're asking, is this really a church? And the answer is yes. We are a church. We have three values: excellence, leadership, and fun. We love to have fun. And what do we call fun? Well, we laugh of ourselves. We are normal, imperfect people. We want to be authentic, to build an authentic church. I am authentic in the sense that I am the same here in my house, in the street. I am authentic with my virtues and my defects, with love and unlove, because I am a man, effectively. So thanks to you for being authentic, and together we will build an authentic church, a church that is different. Let's continue on this part 2 of this series called Better For It, and I leave you with my friend Jair de la Garza. To me, this 2020 started as most beginnings of most years, with a lot of purposes, resolutions, but most of all wanting to be better, at least better than last year. Maybe it was the same case for you, but no one thought that as soon as March came, we would go into a crisis that would leave us quarantined and forever change our plans. We've been at this for more than 3 months, and I'm sure you're ready to go back to normal. I'm ready, at least. But you know something? If we go back to normal, or to the new normal as it is called, and we are exactly the same person as when this began, it would be a waste. It would be a tragedy, actually. I want to tell you something. I think that even this we are living can be one of the best things that has ever happened to you in life. How? Yes, I believe that. Look, in 1985, just a few years after he began his company and it revolutionized personal computing, Steve Jobs had to face one of the challenges and largest crisis in his career, because his board decided that what was best for everyone was for Steve not to be a part of the executive team. Imagine that. And if you know the story and you've read his biography or seen any of the movies, you know Steve went back to Apple 12 years later and led it to be the most valuable company in the world. And he led the development of a lot of products that completely change the way we do a lot of the things we do every day. How we communicate, how we express ourselves, how we consume content. Maybe you're watching this on a product developed under the influence and leadership of Steve. But you know something? What is important about this story are those words Steve shared in that famous speech of business graduates in Stanford when he said, although at that time my going out of Apple seemed to be the worst thing in my life, looking back, I can see it was the best thing that could ever happen to me. As he said it was the truth, the medicine tasted horrible, but the patient definitely needed it. That was Steve, and I tell you this because last week we started a conversation where Alejandro Mendoza challenged us with some questions that were quite uncomfortable. What have we learned through this time? What have we done or what have we been doing lately that we should have done from a long time ago? In other words, what is that medicine that maybe we have had in our mouths but that we haven't wanted to swallow? How can you be better for it? Even in the midst of this, how can you be better for this we are living? And I tell you, the potential for being better is definitely there. But this won't happen simply because you desire it. It won't happen simply because you wish for it or you have good intentions. This will only happen if you and I put into practice an ability. It's a unique ability. It's an ability that we all have and that is so important that I can characterize it as a superpower. A superpower. A superpower that if you activate it, that if you put it into practice, has the possibility of making you better through all of this we are living. Not only what we are living now, but what you have lived in your past and what you will face in the future in your life. Because, friend, you will agree with me that we don't have control over things life throws at us. But it doesn't mean we don't have options. And that's where your superpower takes place or comes in, because it gives you the opportunity of transforming bad things into good ones, wrong things into right things, even transforming evil into goodness. This superpower has the potential of changing completely the path of your life. And maybe you're saying, Jair, okay, I'm in. What is that superpower? What is it? Because it sounds too good to be truth. And let me tell you, what is it? That superpower is your respond ability, your capacity to respond. Yes, not simply to react upon circumstances. Your capacity to respond is important. You have to know that it is not the circumstances which define your answer, your response. It's not how the others respond what defines yours. It is you who decides how to respond before a circumstance. And a well thought, a measured response, if you are a Jesus follower, a faith-filled response has the potential of making you better even through adversity, even through difficult circumstances that we face in life. Now, this sounds very nice. It sounds nice, but I want to tell you something which is important. The truth is there is a small problem. Actually, this is why we're talking about this, because the response that has the potential of changing the natural course of things, it's not natural. It is not natural. The natural course of things, or the potential to revert the natural course of things and the response you have to give before that circumstance is not natural. The response that can turn around all this, it's not something that will come out naturally. It is even different. Actually, I tell you, I'm sure that the type of life you want, the type of life I want, is not the type of life where you react, where you simply react before circumstances that come your way, but rather the type of life you want is where you have the capacity of stopping and responding to different situations in life. If you're Christian, Catholic, you need to know that our faith history is full of men and women who responded differently, who responded, if you want, anti-natural before adversity, before pain, but at the end of the day, they changed the world. In the center of Christianism is a man who decided to give himself to his enemies, to not defend himself on his trial, and even being able to save his own life, decided not to do it to save you and to save me. The point is this: never underestimate the power of a measured response. Never underestimate the power of a measured response. And today I want to talk to you about the story of a person, an individual who modeled this spectacularly. And I'm sure it's a story you know, so I want to start with the end of the story, and I want to ask you to, even if you're tempted to probably say, oh, I already know that story, to not go there, because I'm sure the story of this person intersects in many ways with your story and mine. The story I'm talking about goes like this. We find the hero of this story saying the following words: "You intended to harm me." And you, in this case, are those who were in control, those who had the power, the influence. They are the bad guys, if you want. You are the people who created and designed a series of circumstances which transform victims in perpetrators, which makes the guilty parties, the innocent to become guilty. You have heard this probably. People who hurt are because they have been hurt. And that story that we hear in this occasion wouldn't apply. In this case, it would be different, because in this occasion, we find the hero of the story saying, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good." Listen, in this story, the intentions of God became reality thanks to the response of an individual, of a young man, to different responses, not natural responses, if you will, before circumstances that I don't even think you and I could even start to imagine or fathom. And even though these responses at its time did not make any difference, they didn't have an impact in his life, eventually they changed completely, not only the life of this person, of this young man, but it impacted the faith of millions, of billions of people throughout history, and these are people who include you and I. But listen, let me give you a little bit of context, because this story begins 2,000 years before Christ, around 4,000 years ago, when God decided to intervene in our world, and he calls a man we call, or we know nowadays as Abraham. Abraham was a man to whom God basically said, "I want you to leave everything and start from scratch. I want to make many nations out of you, out of your family. You will be the father of nations, and one of those nations in particular will be the one through which I, God, will bless the whole world." So Abraham eventually had a son called Isaac. Isaac had a son called Jacob. And Jacob had 12 sons who eventually became the 12 tribes of what we nowadays know as the nation of Israel. And what is amazing about this story is the reason why it was written was specifically because of the answers one of his sons had before adverse situations in his life. His name was Joseph. Joseph was a son of Jacob, and he had a very special place in the heart of his father. Actually, his brothers didn't like him because of that. He was like the pampered kid, the spoiled child. And not only that, but eventually, every once in a while, Jacob, his father, asked Joseph to please go and see what his brothers were doing. Go and check what they're doing. And a lot of times, the report Jesus brought back was not at all favorable for his brothers. So there came a time in which his brothers said, "Okay, we have had it. We are fed up of this spoiled brat, of this tattletale. We don't want to have anything to do with him." And one day, when they were far away from home, they took his brother Joseph, put him in a well, and the only thing they needed to decide was if leaving him to die or if they killed him himself. And this is where we're going to retake our story, and I want to read what happened in Joseph's life. Look at what the text says. It says, Judah said to his brothers, "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood?" Saying, what is our gain? Let's get something out of this. I love this difficult situation. Let's make something out of it. If we leave him to die, we won't make anything. Instead of killing him, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites. These were people who sold and traded slaves. Let's sell him to the Ishmaelites. After all, he's our brother. And it seems like there is a drop of mercy in the words of Judah. But at the end of the day, they decided to sell Joseph, their brother, and they decided to break their father's heart by saying that a wild animal had caught him and killed him. The story continues and says that when Joseph was taken to Egypt, the Ishmaelites sold him to Potiphar, an Egyptian who was one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. And here is where I want us to stop for a moment, because here is where your story begins to intersect with Joseph's story, because no one was worrying about Joseph. No one was looking for Joseph. And maybe you have felt like this, especially during the last times. No one is worrying for you. No one is looking for you. No one cares for you. At least that's what it seemed in Joseph's life. But suddenly the text gives a sudden twist. And then it says, the Lord was with Joseph. The Lord was with Joseph. God was with him. And probably you're thinking, this doesn't match. At least it doesn't fit with a lot of versions of Christianity, probably the version of Christianity with which you were brought up, because you cannot reconcile, you cannot understand, and I actually get it, you cannot get or reconcile a good, loving God that allows pain in the world, that allows suffering in the world. Now, leave the world aside. You cannot reconcile. There's a good, loving God who allows pain in your world, in your family, in your life. Because if God would have been really with Joseph, his brothers would not have put him in the well. They would not have sold him to the Ishmaelites. If God were with Joseph, he wouldn't have been sold, being the property of someone else. And these are the things why you maybe grew apart from faith, because when God is with you, things work in your favor, right? When God is with you, things are supposed to work in your favor. And let me tell you something, my friend. Christians have never believed that. Christians have never believed that. And if you stopped believing in a God who does not allow bad things to happen to good people, let me tell you, I have good news for you. Good news, because that God does not exist. That is not the God of the New Testament. That's not the God of men and women who throughout history we can see faced pain, faced adversity and suffering. And it's not that we are inspired by pain, of course not. It's not about suffering and pain. It's about how they discovered that even through pain and even within pain, God was with them. And that's what inspires us. And that's the God in whom we believe. A God whom, even though we experience pain and suffering, he is with us. Let's go back to the story, because the text said the Lord was with Joseph. But definitely good luck was not with him. Definitely prosperity was not with him. And without a doubt, justice was not on Joseph's side. But Joseph was like you and I. He had a superpower. He had the capacity of responding. And Joseph decided to respond as if truly God was with him. Look at what the text says. The Lord was with Joseph so that he prospered. But don't get stuck with the prosperity part, because it wasn't a personal thing, because he was a slave. When his master Potiphar noticed him and saw that the Lord was with him and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, he noticed everything Joseph touched was turned into gold. And maybe I'm exaggerating, but he was extremely responsible. He did everything good, and he decided to respond as if God was with him. Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household. Joseph was in charge of almost everything. But again, that might start sounding good. And don't let yourself be led because you know the story. Joseph was not going up the corporate ladder because he was a slave. Regardless of this sounding okay, you need to understand that Joseph had been free. And in the same way, you and I value freedom nowadays spectacularly because it's the best thing we have. Back then, it was the same. And not only Joseph had been free, but he came from a wealthy family. Probably you have heard from being poor and going rich, that's good, but being rich and going poor, that's difficult. Joseph was not only rich and became poor, then he became a slave. And that was like game over. The game was it. The God you chose bad. You chose bad because that was the worst thing that could happen to anyone back then. But the case was, thanks to Joseph's response, thanks to his responsible and measured response, God was with him. It says then, and the text continues, and he says, he put him in charge of all his household, and he entrusted to his care everything he owned. Then it says, the Lord started to bless the household of Potiphar because of Joseph. And that's where you're thinking, okay, and nothing to Joseph? How come they're gonna start blessing his master and not him? He's responding, he's being responsible, and now God is blessing his master. What's up with that? There's nothing for Joseph. Nevertheless, Joseph responded as if God was with him when it seemed that God had forsaken him. He decided to respond as if God were with him when it seemed God had forsaken him. And this is super important because Joseph didn't have a Bible. Joseph didn't have a small group. Joseph didn't have a Vida Inn. We have so many advantages. There was no angel that went to Joseph and told him, don't worry, God is with you. No, the only thing Joseph had in his heart were those stories his father Jacob had told him about how God had done something amazing in his family with his grandpa and with his great grandpa, and he decided to hold on to those stories. Probably his father told him, and he decided to respond as if God were really with him. But look, the story doesn't get better. Actually, it becomes worse because Joseph ends up in a situation where there was no win for him. Doesn't matter how he responded, he could not win. Look at what the text says. He says, Joseph was well built and handsome, and after a while his master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, come to be with me. There's a version that says that she looked at him with sexual desire. And this was no invitation, friends. It was no suggestions. It was not a seduction even. It was an order. Remember, Joseph was property of that family. Joseph was in a dead end. If he said no, he was going to be on bad terms with the lady and punished. And if he said yes, he was going to be on bad terms with his master and he would be punished as well. And probably you're thinking, yes, what about the superpower? That doesn't work? It doesn't work. What good was it to him, all that wasted time, all that effort of responding well? It was a waste of time. I'm sure Joseph started to feel like probably you have felt, especially in all those occasions where at least all that you know is good, you try to do it and nothing comes out right. And you wonder, you start asking yourself questions and you ask, what does it matter? What does it matter? What is the meaning of keep trying? Joseph, friends, knew that most likely he would die because of the situation he ended up in. Joseph knew he would probably die, but even though he decided to put into practice and activate his superpower, and look what it says, but he refused. And then he told Potiphar's wife, my master trusts me and put me in charge of everything in his household. No one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. Who does that? Imagine that. And then he said, how then could I do such a wicked thing it would be a great sin against God. And probably there you're thinking, Joseph, we're talking about the same God? Are we talking about the same God who supposedly is with you and who has allowed you to go through all those circumstances? That God who is responsible of that incredible and amazing resume you have? Let's look at this. It's Joseph Jacobson, like Stephenson and all like that. He was kidnapped once and sold twice. That was his resume. That was the situation he was in. And you maybe are asking yourself, you want to be loyal to that God who has done nothing good for you lately? But friends, Potiphar's wife didn't settle for that. She kept pressuring and going after Joseph, and things were so tense that there was a time where Joseph decided not to even be in the same room as she, and she got so offended that she accused Joseph of trying to rape her. Eventually this got to Potiphar's ears, and he had no other option but to throw Joseph to jail. Look what the text says. Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. Friend, I know you're going through a tough time right now. I know there are many things that definitely have shaken you, that there's a lot of adversity, probably things that you don't even understand why are happening. But for a moment, I want to ask you, put yourself in this man's shoes. A man who will pay for something he didn't do, who will go to jail for a crime he did not commit. Not only because he did not commit it, he didn't commit it, and he's not only innocent. You know why he's going to be there? Precisely because he did not commit it. Imagine that. Think of that. He was innocent, and not only innocent that someone they caught somewhere. Since he did not commit the crime, he is going to be thrown into jail for the crime he did not commit. And now let's update his resume now. Is Joseph Jacobson was kidnapped once, sold twice, incriminated unjustly, and now incarcerated. And I want to say something. Bad things have been happening to good people for a long time. Listen, even to people with whom God was with. Even to people whom God loves with all their hearts. And today we're going to stop here. So next week we'll continue with this story. And I want to ask you to please connect and don't miss. But before closing our transmission, I want to ask you that this week, in some way, as a task, as a homework, you can ask yourself this question. A question that at the beginning can be frightening, but eventually is liberating. And I want you to ask yourself this question during this week. Please write it down, take a screenshot, and have it in your mind. And the question is this: how would I respond in this circumstance if I were certain God was with me? How would I respond to this circumstance if I were certain God was with me? Because you know how would you respond in general. You know how people respond in these circumstances. But I want you to ask yourself, how would I respond if I had the certainty, like Joseph, that God was with me? Because friends, what if this week, when this situation presents itself, this pain, this adversity, this anxiety comes, we can think, what if God is planning something, and that God is planning depends of my response in these circumstances, not of my reaction, but on my response. Friend, this stage, this is just a chapter in the book of your story. It's not the whole book. This week, struggle with this question. How would you react? How would you respond in this stage if you had the certainty God was with you? I'm sure that if this is something we can embrace, we can take in, there's the potential for, even through this situation we are going through together, you can be better for it. These songs can be the response to the question Jair was asking right a moment ago, so I invite you to reflect on the lyrics and the following songs.
El Dios del cielo y tierra, desde el principio nos amó. Formados a su imagen, y reflejamos su esplendor. Y su corazón lleno de bondad lo probó en la cruz, de mi lado está. Somos los hijos y las hijas de Dios, y en cualquier lugar el Padre muy cerca está. Él nos conoce y nos ama igual, y aunque fallemos, Él nunca nos dejará. Somos los hijos, somos las hijas de Dios. Derramado, somos los hijos del Rey. En su misericordia llama al débil y al infiel, y su corazón lleno de bondad lo probó en la cruz, de mi lado está. Somos los hijos y las hijas de Dios, y en cualquier lugar el Padre muy cerca está. Él nos conoce y nos ama igual, y aunque fallemos, Él nunca nos dejará. Somos los hijos, somos las hijas de Dios. Cuando las mentiras vienen hacia mí, recuérdame que pertenezco a ti, y en medio de tanta oscuridad
Antes de hablar, cantaste sobre mí. Has sido tan bueno para mí. Antes de respirar, soplaste vida en mí. Has sido tan bueno para mí. Oh, tu amor me envuelve, me sostiene, amor sin condición. Me persigue y deja las 99 y va por mí. No puedo ganarlo ni merecerlo. Tu amor se entregó por mí. Oh, tu amor me envuelve, me sostiene, amor sin condición. Aún lejos de ti, tu amor luchó por mí. Has sido tan bueno para mí. Cuando no vi mi valor, te entregaste por mí. Has sido tan bueno para mí. Oh, tu amor me envuelve, me sostiene, amor sin condición. Me persigue y deja las 99 y va por mí. No puedo ganarlo ni merecerlo. Tu amor se entregó por mí. Oh, tu amor me envuelve, me sostiene, amor sin condición. No hay sombra que no alumbres, monte que no escales para encontrarme a mí. No hay pared que no derrumbes, mentira que no rompas para encontrarme a mí. No hay sombra que no alumbres, monte que no escales para encontrarme a mí. No hay pared que no derrumbes, mentira que no rompas para encontrarme a mí. No hay sombra que no alumbres, monte que no escales para encontrarme a mí. No hay pared que no derrumbes, mentira que no rompas para encontrarme a mí. No hay sombra que no alumbres, monte que no escales para encontrarme a mí. No hay pared que no
Amigos,
Friends, thank you very much for being with us up to this point. If you want to know what we can do as a church for you, please connect with us through the link that's on the screen and on the comments. There, we will wait for you in our Zoom meeting. See you next Sunday on part 3 of this series, Better For It. Have an excellent week.